Any Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis would like to read it? Etadandam Visheshakyam Krama Vridhai Yashotarai Toyadibi Parivritam Pradhanena Vritairbahi Yatra Loka Vitanoyam Rupam Bhagavato Hare Etat Andam Visheshakyam Krama Vridhai Rashotarai Tuyadhibi Parivritam Pradhanena Vritairbahi Yatra Loka Vitanoyam Rupam Bhagavato Hare. Vaishnavis. Etad Andam Visheshakyam Krama Vridhai Rashotarai Toyadhibi Parivritam Pradhanena Vritairbahi Yatra Loka Vitanoyam Rupam Bhagavato Hare Etadandam Visheshakyam Krama Vridhai Rashotarai Toyadhibi Parivritam Pradhanena Vritairbahi Yatra Loka Vitanoyam Rupam Bhagavato Hare Etat, this, andam, egg, visheshakyam, called vishesha, krama, one after another, vridhai, increased, dasha, 10 times, uttarai, greater, toya adibhi, by water, and so on. Parivritam, enveloped. Pradhanena, by pradhan. Avritai, covered. Bahi, on the outside. Yatra, where? Lokavitanaha, the extension of the planetary systems. Ayam, this. Rupam, form. Bhagavataha, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare, of Lord Hari. I'm just checking again. It's not really for my sense aggrandizement, but just I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of Bhagavatam classes, and often you want it to be working because you're depending on that injection of Krishna Katha to make it through the day. Are we okay with the streaming, Prabhu? Yeah, great. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. This universal egg, or the universe in the shape of an egg, is called the manifestation of material energy. Its layers of water, air, fire, sky, ego, and mahatattva increase in thickness one after another. Each layer is 10 times bigger than the previous one. Thank you, Prabhu. And the final outside layer is covered by pradhan. Within this egg is the universal form of Lord Hari, of whose body the 14 planetary systems are parts. Please repeat. This universal egg, or the universe in the shape of an egg, is called the manifestation of material energy. Its layers of water, air, fire, sky, ego, and Mahatattva increase in thickness one after another. Each layer is 10 times bigger than the previous one. And the final outside layer is covered by pradhan. Within this egg is the universal form of Lord Hari, of whose body the 14 planetary systems are parts. Srila Prabhupada's purport for this verse: this universe, or the universal sky, which we can visualize with its innumerable planets, is shaped just like an egg. As an egg is covered by a shell, the universe is also covered by various layers. The first layer is water. The next, before I forget, there's a great devotee from ISKCON who passed away some years ago, Sada Puta Prabhu, His Grace Sada Puta Prabhu. For those of you who are scientifically inclined, he had a PhD from Cornell University in mathematics, Dr. Richard L. Thompson, and he wrote about this, and he made some very nice videos as well, including one which shows you visually what this means of these layers and how, how we are really, really, really small in one of these eggs. Sada Puta Prabhu. As an egg is covered by a shell, the universe is also covered by various layers. The first layer is water, the next is fire, then air, then sky, and the ultimate holding crust is pradhan. Within this egg-like universe is the universal form of the Lord as the Virat Purusha. All the different planetary situations are parts of his body. This is already explained in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto. The planetary systems are considered to form different bodily parts of that universal form of the Lord. Persons who cannot directly engage in the worship of the transcendental form of the Lord are advised to think of and worship this universal form. The lowest planetary system, Patala, is considered to be the soul of the Supreme Lord, and the earth is considered to be the belly of the Lord. Brahmaloka, or the highest planetary system where Brahma lives, is considered to be the head of the Lord. This Virat Purusha is considered an incarnation of the Lord. The original form of the Lord is Krishna, as confirmed in Brahma Samhita, Adi Purusha. The Virat Purusha is also Purusha, but he is not Adi Purusha. The Adi Purusha is Krishna. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchit Ananda Vigraha Anadir Ardir Govindaha. Brahma Samhita 5.1. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is also accepted as the Adi Purusha, the original. Krishna says, quote, "No one is greater than I," unquote. There are innumerable expansions of the Lord, and all of them are Purusha, or enjoyers. But neither the Virat Purusha nor the Purusha avatars, Karondadakshaya Vishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, nor any of the many other expansions is the original. In each universe, there are Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, the Virat Purusha, and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. The active manifestation of the Virat Purusha is described here. Persons who are in the lower grade of understanding regarding the Supreme Personality of Godhead may think of the universal form of the Lord, for that is advised in the Bhagavatam. The dimensions of the universe are estimated here. The outer covering is made of layers of water, air, fire, sky, ego, and Mahatattva. and each layer is 10 times greater than the one previous. The space within the hollow of the universe cannot be measured by any human scientist or anyone else. And beyond the hollow, there are 7 coverings, each one 10 times greater than the one preceding it. The layer of water is 10 times greater than the diameter of the universe. And the layer of fire is 10 times greater than that of water. Similarly, the layer of air is 10 times greater than that of fire. These dimensions are all inconceivable to the tiny brain of a human being. It is also stated that this description is of only one egg-like universe. There are innumerable universes besides this one, and some of them are many, many times greater. It is considered, in fact, that this universe is the smallest. Therefore, it comes out last and comes into the body of Mahavishnu first. And when you breathe out, the first particle that comes out of you is the last one to come back in if you inhale what you exhaled back in. So similarly, what you exhale out at the very, very end of a breath, when you breathe it back in, comes in also. So that time of a universe coming out of the body of Mahavishnu and coming back into the body of Mahavishnu is the time duration of the existence of one universe. Therefore, the predominating superintendent, or Brahma, has only 4 heads for management. In other universes, which are far greater than this one, Brahma has more heads. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated that all these Brahmas were called one day by Lord Krishna on the inquiry of the small Brahma, who, after seeing all the larger Brahmas, was thunderstruck. You know that story? Who doesn't know this story? How Brahma wanted to, it's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I guess it's referencing Srimad Bhagavatam, isn't it? Brahma wanted to have darshan of Krishna, and he had a little bit of pride of being Brahma, the demiurge of the universe, and he shows up in Krishna's court. I would like to see Krishna, yes. Who are you? I'm Brahma. Okay, so the secretary goes to see Krishna, and then Krishna says, oh, well, ask him which Brahma. And so he's told, the Lord is asking you, which Brahma? What do you mean, which Brahma? I'm Brahma, the demiurge of the universe. And then he's led inside, it must be a really big foyer, a big lobby, because there are sitting so many other Brahmas, some with 8 heads, 100 heads, it said there are 1,000 heads. So how do you fit all these heads into an attending room is another question. And that's the theme of this class, that when we hear about this intricate creation by Krishna ultimately, and by his expansions, we should, if the process works and if we're sincere, we should be humbled. We should be humbled. And not just humbled, but we should be enthused to chant Krishna's holy name. It's the main theme of this class. And by hearing about Krishna's glories, even in quote unquote material aspects, namely creation, maintenance, and destruction, we should be humbled and enthused to chant his holy name. So to finish the purport, that is the inconceivable potency of the Lord. No one can measure the length and breadth of God by speculation or by false identification with God. These attempts are symptoms of lunacy, madness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Kshakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I remember when I was 20 years old, I had just discovered the Bhagavad Gita and I just started reading it and I was trying to tell everybody that I know about how wonderful the Bhagavad Gita is and how they should chant Hare Krishna. And I remember I was taking a train ride from Paris to Brussels. This was back in 1994. No, late 1993. So I'm taking a train ride from Paris to Brussels to meet my best friend, André Adam, with whom I had gone to the Lycée Français of Los Angeles. He was the son of the ambassador for Belgium for Los Angeles. And we had grown up together, and he was doing his first year of law university in Brussels. And so I remember, like, in the train, I opened the Bhagavad Gita, which I had just recently gotten, and started reading the verse in the 4th chapter about the yugas. These amazing yugas, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga, these phenomenally large time spans, especially compared to, to be frank, for example, a 6,000-year creation, which we read about in the Bible, when you compare it to these cosmological figures of yugas. And I remember my head was against the window and I was just reading these figures where Prabhupada was talking about how, we're in this age of Kali since 5,000 years and it lasts another 427,000 years and how, the previous age is 860,000 years and the age before that is 1.2 million years and the year before, the age before that is 1.8 million years, and all these keep, repeating themselves again and again and again, and the whole length in terms of time of this one universe, which Prabhupada says here is the shortest one, the smallest one of all the universes, is how long? How long does this universe last? What's the length according to the Bhagavad theology? 5,000 years. How long this universe lasts? Yeah, we've been in Kali Yuga since 5,000 years, but the duration of the entire universe, the life of Brahma, and which is? Yeah, and in earthly years? 411 trillion years. My older brother is a mathematician, or he was unlike me. He was extremely good and very good with math and finances, and he did his studies very young, and so he's able to grasp much better than me, and I would say most average people, these big numbers. Like Prabhupada says, we can't really conceive of big numbers and big distances. So I remember around the same time, I went to see my friend and told him about the Bhagavad Gita. It didn't really work. He didn't become a devotee. What to do? Actually, that was the case with me. You know, I tried my sisters and my brother and all my like 4 or 5 really good friends I had, and different stories for different devotees. You know, some devotees, they tell their best friend and they both become devotees, and 50 years later they're still, Prabhupada disciples, best friends. But in my case, it was a brick wall after a brick wall after a brick wall. I thought everybody I was going to tell about this would, react the same way. At any rate, I remember my brother, where I was having lunch with my father and my stepmom in Paris, and I mentioned these figures to my brother. I said, yeah, we're about halfway through this universe, and this universe lasts 411 trillion years. And I remember this is like 29 years ago. I remember he said 400 trillion years? So we're fortunate. And we're fortunate to have access to this knowledge. We are fortunate to have access to this knowledge that the Srimad Bhagavatam provides us about our place in this universe, about the universe itself, and in sort of summary format about how the functioning, the engineering of the universe takes place, right? Now, as Prabhupada says here in the purport, ultimately what really counts is Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, that God has many expansions, and God creates, maintains, dissolves a particular universe through the agency of his energies and through the agencies of his different expansions, right? Hence, there's this notion that I recommend all devotees know if they're speaking in sort of, academic circles or educated people or anyone, is this notion of polymorphic monotheism, or polymorphic bi-monotheism, to be precise. Monotheism, one supreme being, one supreme God, Lord Krishna. And technically we can speak of bi-monotheism because Krishna is always there with Srimati Radharani, Lakshmi Narayan, Radha Krishna. So in that sense we can say bi-monotheism. And poly means many, and morphic, metamorphosis, different forms. Polymorphic bi-monotheism, this idea of, the avatar theory. The avatar theory. That the original form of God is that of Krishna, as the Brahma Samhita says. But that Supreme Lord, if he so wishes, if he so desires, because he's omnipowerful, can and does expand himself in different forms, right? Now, as apprentices, these different forms of Vishnu, the Vaishnavas, the Bhagavatam, accepts these forms as absolutely spiritual, as absolutely transcendental. And this is important to note because this is one of the factors that differentiate the Vaishnavas or the personalists or the Bhakti yogis from the non-dualists, from what we call the Mayavadis, right? The Mayavadis, those who generally follow Shankara Acharya, they claim that the form of Vishnu, and therefore the forms of all the different Vishnu avatars, are material. They're material. They're in the mode of goodness, but they're material. Therefore, there's this idea that, God is impersonal, God is this Brahman, and this Brahman comes, incarnates, literally. See, when we speak of incarnation, the word carne in Latin is flesh, matter. So it's not actually technically a good term to use to apply to Vishnu Tattva avatars. Because we believe, our Shastra says, that the Vishnu avatars are Satchit Ananda, right? Their body is 100% spiritual. We believe there's no difference between the Lord's skin, the Lord's flesh, and the Lord's heart, and the Lord's soul, so-called. There is no such thing as God's soul and God's body. Right? If there is, it would be his own lila, but both are transcendental in nature. They're all 100% spiritual in nature. Satchit Ananda, Vigraha. However, when we speak of incarnation, literally it means in carne, like a soul, right? A spiritual being is in the flesh. Those who speak Spanish, they may like the joke that, there's a Mexican preparation called chili con carne, which is chili with meat. It's a meat preparation. Chili con carne. So we are alma. The word alma in Spanish represents the soul. So we are almas con carne, right? And the Mayavadis, they make the mistake of considering the form of Vishnu, the form of Nrsingadev, the form of Krishna, to also be material. Brahman incarnates, in this case literally, because they see the form of God as temporary, mode of goodness, but temporary and thus material. That Brahman incarnates in a sattvic form of Krishna, for example. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether you worship Krishna or Lakshmi or Ganesh or Shivaji or any of the devas and devatas, forgetting that there's a clear distinction even in Shastra between Bhagavan and devatas, because ultimately everything is Brahman, right? And even these forms are illusory. And they apply that also with the Guru, right? Now, as Vaishnavas, we don't equate the Guru with Vishnu. We see the Guru or the advanced Vaishnava or Vaishnavas as individual souls who have material bodies, but because these bodies are engaged in Krishna's service purely, their bodies can be considered spiritual. Just like this microphone can be considered spiritual because it's being used, in Krishna's service. There's a story that Bhavananda Prabhu tells in those Prabhupada memories where he was walking along with Prabhupada in Mayapur on the bank of the Ganges, and there was a pretty large embankment to reach the actual level of the water. And he recounts that he hopped down that 1 meter or so to the lower level of the Ganges bank and put up his arm or his elbow or his forearm as a support for Prabhupada to lean on and step down. As he put up his arm or his forearm, Prabhupada used it as a support and then got down to the lower side of the embankment. And as he was putting his second foot on the embankment, he pushed Bhavananda Prabhu's arm away quite violently. I mean, at least enough that Bhavananda Prabhu was wondering, why did Prabhupada throw my arm like this? So according to Bhavananda Prabhu, and this is in those Prabhupada memories that you can find, he later on that evening, he politely asked Prabhupada, did I offend you in any way? Or I'm just wondering, why did you push my arm away like that? And then Prabhupada said, this is what the Mayavadi disciple does to his Mayavadi guru. He takes help from his guru until he reaches moksha, until he gets so-called liberation, and then he throws him away. He doesn't need him anymore. It makes sense. If we're all God, if we're all one, then I may show some, as Prabhupada says, time-serving devotion to you, but ultimately I don't believe you're a real person. I believe you and I are one. So once I realize that I am you and that you are me and that we're all one, then the relationship is finished, right? Similar, like let's say you use a ladder to climb to the roof, and once you get on the roof, you throw the ladder away. But as we sing every morning, all these 8 beautiful verses by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and there's one in particular, right, that glorifies the Guru as an intimate servant of Srimati Radharani and the gopis, right? And the disciple's duty is to assist, just like the Guru or the Gurus are assisting their spiritual preceptors, ultimately in assisting, personal associates of Krishna, and ultimately, giving pleasure to Krishna, right? I was listening to a lecture of Prabhupada, and he explains this thing of Krishna being the original form of all the expansions quite well. So I put a bookmark, and I want to play it so we can listen to this short little clip of Prabhupada speaking and summarizing this point that, God may have so many avatars through which he creates the world and maintains it, and the very complex engineering with the pradhan and the mahatattva and so on, but ultimately Krishna is tu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the original Supreme Lord. So here's our founder Acharya.
Krishna has got various forms.
Could you hear? He said Krishna has got various forms.
But his real form is Krishna. God has got many forms, but the original form is that playing on flute, cut in 3 places, with Barahavatang Samasitam Vidasundarangam, with a feather on the head. These are Vedic description of Krishna.
Right. So again, that's the Siddhanta. That's the Siddhanta. Krishna who plays the flute. Prabhupada continues here.
So the conclusion is, all these forms, iti, all these, cha amsa kala. Amsa means plenary portion, not personal. And kala means portion of the portion.
Right. That's why they say technically, Krishna never leaves Vrindavan, because everything else is done by his expansions. Let me read to you another verse in this connection, and it was kind of a coincidence. This is a compilation written by some devotees from, I think, Bombay or from India, from ISKCON India, in Faridabad, and it's called "Inspiring Prayers from the Bhagavad Purana." It's famous prayers by different famous actors in the Srimad Bhagavatam. If you do puja, for example, Rupa Goswami mentions we should recite notable prayers. In the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada mentions that one of the things that devotees should do is recite notable prayers. So, there's no greater notable prayers than the prayers found in the Bhagavatam. And so, in the prayers by Devaki to Krishna in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, she mentions something very similar to what we're hearing here. Listen to this verse. Yasyam sham shamsha bhagena vishvutpati layodayaha bhavanti kila vishvatmams tam tvadyaham gatim gata. So Devaki is praying to Krishna. She's saying, O soul of all that be, the creation, which we're reading about, right, in this 3rd canto, the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe are all carried out by a fraction of an expansion of an expansion of your expansion. But the real gist is what she says later. She says, what she says next. Today I have come to take shelter of you, the Supreme Lord. So this ties into our main point, that by reading about, by hearing about the general or specific ways in which Krishna behaves, we should be inclined, or we should be pushed to take shelter of the Lord, right? Another reference, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, right? Matak sarvam paravartate. In the Gita, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. So that's the short, you want the short description of, the universe. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate. Bas. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. You want the longer version? Read this, 26th chapter of the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam. And, you can satisfy yourself to your heart's content in trying to understand the intricacies of the engineering, of how Krishna creates this world. And if it's true, I mean, we believe it's true, but if it's true, my God, and that's the case to say it, my God, how original this creation is. Someone said, it's kind of vulgar, but I think it's funny. I like the reference. Some scholar, I think, said, either God has amazing originality, because who can come up with, either God has amazing originality, or the sages who wrote down these, who imagined these stories were taking amazing drugs. Of course, we don't believe the latter, we believe the former. But, you got to have some serious imagination to come up with this type of model, isn't it? It's quite amazing. And as I said, when someone hears about the glory of Krishna, about the glory of Krishna's avatars, and how one avatar goes into the other avatar, and each avatar has then different functions, and you've got this Virat Purusha who's material but also spiritual, right? In this very own verse, Prabhupada, because sometimes we hear this Virat Purusha as a material form of the Lord, but he's also a Purusha, so in that sense he's also a spiritual form of the Lord. By the way, Prabhupada mentions as a small, let me finish that sentence. So when we hear about these things, we should be awed and we should be humbled, right? And in this connection, I want to share with you one of my favorite pastimes of Prabhupada in a story that Tamal Krishna Maharaj tells him. It's very apropos, very, very apropos. This is a recollection by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, one of the early disciples of Prabhupada, who spent a lot of time with Prabhupada. Actually, some say he had the most, physical association with Prabhupada. He passed away about 10 years ago. And so I don't know if you've heard this story, it's quite famous, then you'll relish it. If you haven't heard it, I think you'll relish it also. And it's in relationship again with this notion of this gigantic engineering that we are, faced with and should be in awe of. So I'll turn the camera around. Those who are online, you'll just hear the story.
It was in the early days. I was the Mott commander in Los Angeles, La Cienega Temple. Prabhupada called me one day. And he was talking to me, and he asked me to get the Bhagavatam. He had the Bhagavatam, his original Bhagavatam. He said the cover, was a spiritual sky. And he said, you see this spiritual sky? It's very big. He said, you cannot fathom how big this is. He said, and this the spiritual sky, 3/4 is the spiritual sky, 1/4 is the material creation. That material creation has innumerable universes. One universe is so big the scientists can't measure it.
As apprentices, our scriptures describe that one universe is contained in a bag of mustard seeds. And you take a huge bag of mustard seeds, that's how many universes there are.
And we're on one planet in one of those universes out of innumerable universes, which are constituting 1/4 of the creation. So on this one planet, Earth, it's one of the smaller planets in this universe. He said there are 7 continents, and on one of the continents, North America, there's a great city called Los Angeles. And in that Los Angeles city, there's a long boulevard called La Cienega. And on
A long boulevard called La Cienega Boulevard.
At La Cienega Boulevard, there is one church building, which is now a Hare Krishna temple. And in that one Hare Krishna temple, there is one temple commander, and he thinks that he is very important.
You get it? He was a temple commander. So there's all these universes, unlimitedly almost, and in one universe there's one planet among so many planets, and in one planet there's 7 continents, and on one continent there's one country, there's so many cities, and in one city there's so many boulevards, there's one boulevard, and on that one boulevard there's so many buildings, there's one church, and then in that church there's one temple commander who thinks he is very important. So similarly, that's why it's important that you read the Bhagavatam. That's why it's so important for you, and I'm obviously speaking to myself, it's so important for you to read the Bhagavatam. or to hear lectures, by Prabhupada, or somehow or other contact that Bhagavatam. Because when you read the Bhagavatam, you're reminded, just first of all, as soon as you open the page of the Bhagavatam, you're reminded, whether you believe it or not is up to you, but you're reminded that at least according to the version of reality from the Bhagavatam, even human beings are not the only ones in this universe. All of a sudden, you open the Bhagavatam and the human race itself shrinks, right? You're reminded, actually, even human beings are like middle class, in the universe. We're middle, we're in the middle planetary system, so we're middle class inhabitants of the universe. It's not very, extraordinary. And the very fact that there's all these other types of living beings in the universe, the Kinnaras, the Vishvadevas, the Maruts, it's just the list, right, of different species. And then what to speak of the big demigods, Lord Shiva and Brahma and all that, should humble us, right? So it's important to daily Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. It's really important to connect with the Bhagavatam. You should do that. And when you do that, then you're reminded of your position. One of my favorite bands, Krishna conscious bands, one of the only Krishna conscious bands, at least at this period in history, is a band called Shelter. If you heard of the band, there was this punk rock band in the 1990s in America that did great, very aggressive music, very rajasic music. Raghunath Prabhu, now he's a famous yoga teacher in America and is the co-host of the Wisdom of the Sages podcast, which was voted the #1 podcast in the whole category of spirituality a year ago. And he and Kasupa Prabhu just speak straight Srimad Bhagavatam. It's fantastic preaching. And so he had this song called Beyond Planet Earth. And the lyrics went, infinitely small, we think we can understand it. Go out and stand tall, call their bluff. There's more beyond this planet Earth. You have a responsibility, not necessarily to, actually, challenge the physicalist paradigm that there's no life on other planets, human life is the only life there is, and as Prabhu was saying yesterday, the reductionistic notion of the Big Bang and how, just neurons and protons assemble, and consciousness is simply just a product of neurons and protons following the laws of physics and biology as we know them, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a responsibility, if not to outright challenge that paradigm, but to live it, to live the challenge. In other words, you have a responsibility to live a life which incarnates, since we're talking about incarnations, incarnates a belief in a paradigm where personhood and action based on love is the foundation. And you're supposed to believe that at the center of this entire universe, not just the universe, of all the universes, ultimately there's a young teenage couple. They have Satchidananda bodies, granted, etc., etc. But this idea you should hold dear in your heart. That, you believe, and hopefully you're right, we hope we're right, that at the center of our existence, at the center of the world, at the center of reality, in its most confidential element or area, is a divine couple. A divine teenage couple, Radha and Krishna. And Goloka Vrindavan, and so on. What a wonderful thing you can believe in, right? And the more you hear the Bhagavatam, the more you serve the mission, the more you get a desire to glorify the Lord. Just like yesterday, I forget your name, Prabhu. Tejas. So Tejas Prabhu yesterday, don't mind, huh? Because it's actually glorifying you. In the middle of the day, I was like, how are you? He's like, I'm not good. I was like, what's wrong? It's like, I have so much service, I don't have time to chant my rounds. and so sarcastically I say, wow, that's horrible, isn't it? I mean, actually, it's wonderful, actually, right? And he still was serious. And I said, well, if anything, it's, what you just said now is proof. It's living proof that I see right in front of you. You're increasing my faith because, the first canto, second chapter of the Bhagavatam says, Shushushro Shadadana Syavasudeva Kataruchi, that Mahatseva, by serving the Vaishnavas, and so, for example, serving, Simhachalam, what happens? You develop a taste. You develop ruchi for Krishna Katha. Right? So by engaging in practical service to the mission that Lord Chaitanya has inaugurated, that Srila Prabhupada has crystallized in the form of his wonderful International Society for Krishna Consciousness, by plugging into that system and chanting the holy name and also serving somehow the mission, whether it's cleaning pots or taking care of children or worshiping the deity or going on Harinam or sponsoring a Sunday feast or whatever it is, by doing that, by serving prasadam at lunchtime, you are developing a taste. Maya sakta manaparta. You're developing a taste for, an attachment for Krishna. And that's what you want, ultimately. That's the goal of your life. The goal of your life is to develop an increased attachment to Krishna's holy name, to Krishna's leelas, so that you can live this life as Krishna conscious as possible, help others come to Krishna, and then as Krishna desires at the time of leaving your body, Krishna desires ultimately, but he himself says, right, Janma karma chameti vyam vivam yuveti tattvatha tyakta deham punarjana mameti. You'll go back to Krishna, back to Goloka Vrindavan for an eternal life in your actual spiritual bodies, for full, unending happiness, knowledge, bliss, free of anxiety, right? So that's what's in store for you if you do this daily recitation of the Bhagavatam and you daily come in contact with the Bhagavatam and you daily chant the holy name. So before concluding with one or two sentences, maybe there's some comments from the senior devotees or questions. Going once, going twice. Okay, well then to conclude, as I said at the beginning, we're very fortunate. We should consider ourselves fortunate. We should be humbled. First of all, we should believe in these statements. And if we don't believe in these statements, then we should pray that we can believe in these statements, We should pray to have shraddha, to have faith in these statements. We should pray to accept these statements from the Bhagavatam as a Christian accepts the Bible. You see these Christians, some of these Christians have very, very strong faith in their scripture, Because the more we have faith in what the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita and Lord Chaitanya and our spiritual masters and Srila Prabhupada tells us, the more our life will be happy. The less we'll engage in sense gratification, and the more we'll engage in Shravanam Kirtanam and serving Krishna. And according to our own text, the more we do that, the more happy we'll become, and the more happy the planet will be, and the more a win-win situation happens for all of us. So let us continue chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and serving the mission, and serving each other, and tolerating each other, and being humble, or trying to be at least. And in this way we can all go back home, back to Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
nicht so gut, oder wie?
Ha?
Also da nicht so gut. Da nicht so exakt.
Nee, da schon gesagt. Für mich war halt zu viel Reis nicht, ich war so lustig zu machen.
Wie wir machen das?
Ja, da bin ich unterwegs so unterwegs. Ich war halt so.
So geschwächt, oder?
Eine Stunde gesungen.
Glaubst du, es lag